There was a time when adventure still felt possible, simply because you believed it could be. Not because you had proof, not because anyone promised it would work, but because childhood still allowed room for stories to be true. The Goonies lives inside this space, the space between belief and loss, between imagination and the quiet realization that things are about to change. The Goondocks is already disappearing. Houses are being sold. Families are packing up lives they haven't finished living in yet. Adults talk about progress and opportunity, but the kids only hear endings. Mikey doesn't want to save a house. He wants to save a version of life where his friends are still close, where summers feel endless, and where growing up hasn't started demanding payment. Then the map appears. Old, torn, ridiculous, and somehow holy. The legend of One-Eyed Willy isn't heroic. It's unfinished. A pirate who never made it home. A treasure no one ever proved existed. A story that survived only because someone refused to stop telling it. And that's exactly why it matters. Because childhood doesn't chase certainty. It chases possibility. But even in a story about wonder, danger is never far away. The Fratellis move through the edges of this world like a warning. They are what happens when survival replaces hope, when family becomes obligation instead of love. They don't chase the treasure because they believe in it. They chase it because they have nothing else left. And without realizing it, they become the future the Goonies are trying to avoid. Behind the scenes, the cast didn't know what waited in the caves, or that this film would one day live inside so many memories. They only knew that they were allowed to believe in something impossible for a little while. And that belief still lives inside every frame. The Goonies isn't just about treasure. It's about the moment before childhood understands it can't stay forever, and the friends who refuse to let it disappear quietly. The attic feels like a place where memories are waiting to be forgotten. Boxes sit quietly against the walls, filled with objects that used to mean everything. Old toys, old stories, old pieces of a life that isn't ready to admit it's becoming the past. When Mikey stumbles upon the map, it doesn't feel like destiny. It feels like resistance. The paper is brittle. The ink barely holds together. The edges curl like they're tired of surviving. But the lines still lead somewhere, and that alone feels important. A story that was never finished. One-Eyed Willy isn't a hero. He's a warning. A pirate who chased something impossible and never returned. But to Mikey, that doesn't make the story sad. It makes it alive. It means the ending hasn't been proven yet. The others don't believe in the map because it's convincing. They believe in it because Mikey does. Brand sees danger but follows anyway. Mouth mocks it but memorizes it. Data studies it like a puzzle. Chunk is terrified but refuses to be left behind. Andy and Steph watch the group more than the map, unsure which direction they truly belong to yet. And that's how childhood works. You don't follow the story. You follow the people who believe in it. Behind the scenes, the original map would eventually be lost in real life, accidentally thrown away, becoming a vanished artifact of the very legend it represented. A reminder that even the things we want to preserve the most can disappear quietly. The first choice isn't about treasure. It's about stepping outside together. It's about deciding that even if the story ends badly, it's better than never trying to finish it. And when the door closes behind them, childhood doesn't disappear yet, but it does hold its breath. The Fratellis don't feel like villains from a fairy tale. They feel like people who ran out of better options. They move through the story with desperation instead of mystery. Loud, clumsy, angry. Always a step behind the world they're trying to outrun. Mama Fratelli isn't chasing power. She's chasing control. Jake and Francis aren't chasing glory. They're chasing approval. And in every scene, you can feel how close they are to falling apart. That is what makes them unsettling. They are the future the Goonies don't want to become. Where the kids chase the map because they believe in something, the Fratellis chase it because they've stopped believing in anything else. Treasure isn't wonder to them. It's survival. It's escape from consequences, from debt, from failure, from themselves. They are not monsters. They are what happens when hope runs out. This is why the story works so well inside the Goonies. They aren't just obstacles. They're a mirror. A version of adulthood where dreams weren't protected, where loyalty turned into obligation, where family became a chain instead of a shelter. The film never lets them become pure evil. They argue, they panic, they fail. They are human, which makes them feel real. Behind the scenes, Anne Ramsey's performance as Mama Fratelli was so committed that she terrified the child actors between takes, and then immediately made them laugh afterward. That balance lives inside the character too. Fear mixed with absurdity, threat mixed with comedy. The Fratellis follow the kids into the tunnels not because they understand the legend, but because they refuse to be left behind. And that's the cruel irony. Both groups are chasing the same story, but only one of them is still allowed to believe in it. The tunnels don't begin in a cave. They begin in a restaurant, a place that should feel safe, normal, ordinary, a place where nothing legendary is supposed to hide. And that's exactly why it works. The old lighthouse restaurant sits quietly at the edge of town, already feeling like something forgotten. Floors creak, walls lean. The building doesn't feel alive. It feels like it's waiting to be remembered. When the Goonies break inside, it isn't heroic. It's awkward, careless, loud. The kind of break-in only kids would attempt without realizing how badly it could go. They don't find the treasure. Instead, they find a broken fireplace, a hidden passage, a hole in the floor that doesn't belong there. And suddenly, the story changes. Because this isn't imagination anymore. This is something that was built, something that was hidden, something that wanted to stay lost. The tunnels beneath the restaurant don't feel adventurous. They feel unfinished, like something that was never meant to be found again. The air shifts, the walls tighten, the light fades faster than expected. And for the first time, the Goonies understand that this isn't a story being told to them anymore. It's a place they have stepped inside. Behind the scenes, the sets were constructed to feel unstable and claustrophobic. The cast has said it genuinely felt like crawling into something that didn't want them there. And that discomfort translates. You can feel it in the way they move, the way they hesitate, the way their voices change. This is where the movie quietly grows up. Because the tunnels don't promise safety, they promise consequence. And somewhere behind them, the Fratellis are no longer a rumor. They're close enough to be heard. This is the moment the Goonies stop chasing a legend and start realizing they're being chased by it. The Goonies don't feel like characters. They feel like kids you used to know. Mikey isn't brave in the loud way. He leads because he believes, and belief is heavier than courage. Sean Astin plays him with quiet urgency, the look of someone trying to hold a world together, with nothing but hope. Brand, played by a young Josh Brolin, carries responsibility before he understands it. He isn't ready to grow up, but he's already practicing. There's tenderness in the way he watches the others, like he knows this version of them won't last. Mouth, played by Corey Feldman, talks because silence scares him. His humor isn't just comedy, it's armor. Data, played by Ke Huy Quan, believes invention can fix anything. Because as a kid, you still think creativity is stronger than fear. Chunk is portrayed by Jeff Cohen and carries the soul of the movie. His insecurity, his kindness, his desperate need to belong make him impossible to forget. And Sloth, under layers of makeup, becomes one of the most gentle figures in 1980s cinema. Not because he's strong, but because he is kind. Andy and Steph, played by Carrie Green and Martha Plimpton, represent the uncertainty of standing between childhood and whatever comes next, neither fully inside the group, neither fully outside it. What makes the cast special is that they never feel like performers trying to be kids. They feel like kids who are allowed to be seen. Behind the scenes, many of them didn't realize this movie would define their lives. Some would go on to long careers. Some would step away. Some would struggle. Some would return decades later, carrying the weight of this story with them. And that's what gives the Goonies its quiet ache. You aren't just watching characters grow up. You're watching the last moment before these kids, and the actors themselves, could ever be this young again. The adventure doesn't just live in the caves. It lives in the faces that carried it. Every adventure has a moment where it stops being about discovery and starts being about compassion. In the Goonies, that moment belongs to Chunk and Sloth. They don't meet as heroes. They meet as outcasts. Chunk is terrified of being forgotten, convinced he doesn't belong anywhere, desperate to prove that he matters. Sloth is hidden away, chained, treated like something to be ashamed of, a presence the world decided was easier to lock away than understand. And yet, when they see each other, neither one sees what they've been told to see. Chunk doesn't see a monster. He sees someone lonely. Sloth doesn't see a joke. He sees someone kind. What makes their bond even more powerful is who Sloth really was beneath the makeup. John Matuszak wasn't just an actor. He was a former NFL defensive lineman, a Super Bowl champion with the Raiders, a man whose entire life had been built on physical dominance and intimidation, now playing one of the gentlest souls in 1980 cinema. And that contrast matters, because Sloth isn't scary. He's soft. He's loyal. He's hopeful. Under the scars and the chains is someone who just wants to belong. And Matusak's performance gives Sloth a tenderness that no amount of prosthetics could hide. His strength isn't in his size. It's in the way he chooses kindness the moment he's given the chance. Chunk, played by Jeff Cohen, meets him with vulnerability instead of fear. Knowing that Cohen filmed many of his most embarrassing scenes, including the truffle shuffle, while sick with the chickenpox, only deepens the honesty of that vulnerability. He wasn't pretending to feel exposed. He was exposed. Together, they redefine what heroism looks like in this story. Not bravery, not confidence, but acceptance. Chunk and Sloth are the heart of the Goonies because they prove that the real treasure was never gold. It was belonging. Nothing in the Goonies prepares you for the ship. The tunnels make you believe in danger. The traps make you believe in history. But the ship makes you believe in magic. When the Goonies step into that cavern and see the ship for the first time, the story stops being about possibility and becomes proof. A full pirate ship, hidden beneath the earth, untouched by time in all the ways that matter. Torn sails, dark wood, silent promise. Behind the scenes, Richard Donner refused to let the cast see the ship until the cameras were rolling. So the wonder on their faces isn't performance. It's childhood meeting something it didn't know was allowed to exist. You can see that moment when belief stops being abstract and becomes physical. Mikey doesn't just see treasure. He sees validation. He sees confirmation that imagination wasn't lying to him. And yet, the film doesn't let the moment stay pure. Because wonder never lasts without pressure. The Fratellis arrive. Greed enters the room. The magic becomes something that can be stolen, chased, and corrupted. This is the moment when childhood realizes that beauty must be protected. The ship represents everything the Goonies are trying to save. A place untouched by endings. A story that hasn't been rewritten yet. A promise that belief still has power. But the ship is also a warning. You can't stay here. You can only witness it. Because discovery is never permanent. It is a moment. And moments, no matter how perfect, always pass. The ship is the heart of the Goonies because it understands something devastatingly true. You only get to see the magic for the first time once. After that, you spend the rest of your life trying to remember how it felt. The hardest part of any adventure is not surviving it. It's leaving it. The Goonies don't lose the treasure because they're careless. They lose it because they finally understand what it means. Gold isn't meant to be carried out of places like this. Some things are meant to stay exactly where they are found. Untouched, unowned, but remembered. When Mikey lets the treasure go, it isn't a defeat. It's a decision. A quiet recognition that not every victory is meant to be taken home. Some victories are simply knowing you were there. The group doesn't celebrate. They don't cheer. They move differently now. Slower, softer. As if they already know this is the last time the story will ever feel this way. Above ground, the world is waiting. Parents, police, news cameras. Adults ready to turn their adventure into something explainable. The Goonies don't fight it. They stand together and let the moment pass through them. Behind the scenes, this ending mirrors real life more than anyone realized at the time. These kids would never be this age again. In this story, in this moment. Careers would change, lives would separate. The adventure would soon become a memory. And that truth lingers in the way they look at each other. When Mouth says goodbye, when Brand steps back into responsibility, when Chunk realizes he isn't alone anymore, when Sloth finds a new family, when Mikey stands quietly, watching the story close without trying to stop it. This is where the Goonies becomes more than nostalgia. It becomes a lesson that growing up isn't loud, it's gentle. It's standing in a place that meant everything and realizing you won't ever stand there in the same way again. The goodbye doesn't hurt because it's tragic. It hurts because it's honest. Because childhood doesn't end with a door slamming. It ends with you slowly walking away while still looking back. We spend most of our lives trying to remember. Not the scenes, not the lines, not even the story itself, but the feeling of believing that something impossible might still be waiting for us somewhere beyond the places we were told to stop looking. The Goonies doesn't survive because of pirate ships or traps or treasure. It survives because it remembers what belief felt like before it learned how to be careful. This movie understands that childhood isn't about innocence. It's about courage without proof. It's about trusting friends more than facts. It's about thinking that if you move forward together, the world might have to make room for you. And when we watch it now, we aren't just watching kids on an adventure. or watching ourselves before we learned how to doubt. The treasure was never the gold. It was the decision to chase something simply because it felt true. It was the loyalty to keep walking when fear arrived. And it was the realization that some moments only exist so they can become memories later. The Goonies didn't save their childhood. They proved it mattered. And in doing so, they gave us permission to remember our own, to forgive the parts of ourselves that believed too easily, to miss the versions of us that weren't afraid of endings yet. Because growing up isn't about losing wonder. It's about learning how to carry it quietly. The tunnels eventually collapse. The ships fade into legend. The map disappears. But the story remains, not in caves or coins, but in the part of us that still wants to believe something beautiful might be waiting around the corner. This story shows us that we are all Goonies, and Goonies never say die. They just grow up. If you want to go deeper into the Goonies, there's more waiting for you beyond the story. Over on Patreon, the director's cut of this episode steps away from the adventure and moves behind the camera, into the writing choices, the set decisions, the performances, and the moments that almost changed this film forever. We talk about the darker early drafts, how the Fratellis were reshaped during filming, why the kids didn't know the ending, and how Spielberg and Donner protected the innocence of this movie when it was easiest to lose. To hear the director's cut of this episode, please visit patreon.com/cinemastalgia or the link in the description of this episode. Thank you for listening, and thank you for reliving the movies that made us.